Okay, let's call a reconvene the meeting of the BAC. We have anybody on Zoom?
Not so far.
Not so far. We do have. I would remind you the procedure, if you're going to make a motion, state your name. If you're going to second it, state your name and hold your hand high when you vote. Tonight, we're going to start off with IT.
Yes. Where would you like to start?
Do you have any opening comments you'd like to?
I guess one of the first things is the salary, and I guess that's been rehashed multiple times, and you know that we're in agreement, all the department heads got together and talked about 6%. And I've been told that that's pretty much a dead issue at this point. No sense to talk about that one, so. We'll go talking about that. The only thing I would like to address about that is I have a person who works for me and he's exempt, he's paid through ARPA funds. And I just want to make sure he also is entitled to that 6%. And I guess that's a question for you guys as well. If that goes through, would he get that in the ARPA funds? He's paid through ARPA.
He's paid through ARPA, so is that a line item in this budget?
No, it is
No.
not.
Okay, then that's not our purview, right?
Okay, yeah, so again, that's the question for you guys, it is, if the 6% holds to that, so. I'm sorry?
Yeah, we haven't, I don't,
Okay, but that's just something to address later. Okay, thank you.
their meeting.
Okay, start off with revenues. Department head and the commissioners concur on the amount of $5,000.
And that's $2,500 from UT and $2,500 from the airport. That's yearly, so.
Can I have a motion?
Kathleen Miller.
A second, Tom Welgus.
Discussion? All in favor?
So good.
Opposed? Motion carries. On the expenditures, department head is requesting $336,628. Commissioners, $332,798. We heard the discussion on this salary increases.
I believe that difference probably is the 7 versus 6. I guess she stuck in her number originally.
Any questions on the expenditures other than the salary?
The salary has to be committed this year with the ARPA funds.
That would be correct.
That's out of our control.
No. Maybe that's-
It seems that the increase was in the software. Is there something special going on there?
Computer software, we've added that new person, which is Banyan Jarvis. He's our cybersecurity officer. And we have that additional expense for all the cybersecurity software for ransomware detection. Our logs are being looked at, make sure we're not getting hacked. That's the primary increase.
It's something we didn't have before.
That is correct.
On that same line, computer software, 24 budget at 24,000. 9 months into this, you've spent 5,000. Is there any large expense coming up before the end of the year?
There are a few, most of my renewals seem to be in the last quarter of the year, so that seems to be the reason why you're not seeing all that big increase right now. It's wherever my renewal dates are in my software.
And if all of that money isn't used, is it encumbered and rolled forward into the 25 budget?
She said no, it is not, so. And there's a good chance that all of it will not be used.
And I'm sorry, and what did you say about being encumbering?
And she said it would not.
No, that's not how, no,
Where does it go? If they allot 25,000 and 5,000 is spent.
Yeah.
where does the other 20 go?
Unassigned fund,
Yeah,
In a what fund?
unassigned fund.
undesignated funds.
Okay, and,
All
and then
collective.
where in this
Not-
whole budget is that, the undesignated funds reapplied?
Mike, you want
In
to
this, well, so in this budget, it's not reapplied because we, right now, last year
Right.
in 22 had a negative balance for unassigned funds anyway. And for 23, we did better, so we had a positive balance, but that's still eating into the unassigned. So we don't have any unassigned funds to put back to the budget to be able to tell you because of a couple bad years. And a couple of those bad years are for a couple of different reasons, obviously, some of which you'll be talking about later on as we keep going, because you can only.
It's the overall
Yeah.
collective budget. It's not by department.
So when it's approved, whatever that number is where you fall out through, obviously, I just, like most of your municipality audit reports, you're gonna see that you got some that you did well, and you got some that you went over for whatever reason. Now, from an administrative standpoint, we try to step back and say, all right, well, what happened with these particular departments or whatever? And maybe there's a perfectly justifiable reason for it. But at the end of the day, it's really the net is wherever that's gonna go. In some cases, if the net, for whatever reason, is negative, then it's not going back into any budget, really. It's going against whatever we had,
So my honest goes into a general area.
basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will have, but I think part of the, I might have a balance too, because of stuff we covered with ARPA that initially I put in the budget.
It's possible, and there may be some departments that are the opposite.
Okay.
It just seems that with a 5-year, actual average of 13.5 a year, and now they want to, assign $38,000 to this account.
And that is correct, and it's because of cyber. Now you can actually, cyber software, I got huge increases coming up in cyber. I have a, like Silo, we have a, what's called Tyler Tech software, which does our log analysis. That's a $10,000 annual cost. Tyler Comprehensive, which they work with our documentation and doing our policies. That's actually a $38,000 cost. So there's some big software costs that, depending on where the renewal dates are, that's what, that's such a huge increase.
So,
The other thing I'm having for a big increase is, yeah, stuff that will come off ARPA, but that'll be a little.
no,
bit-
but I mean, but because your yearly averages are gonna be skewed now, because we were able to use some other funds to help offset these costs and pay them out of those funds. So, but now those funds aren't available anymore, so it's gonna start hitting the books again, even for these ones that aren't new. Stuff that we were able to pay for before now are gonna have to come back, or it's gonna hit the reserve accounts, which we're gonna have to start ratcheting up the reserve funding for them to save as well. So unfortunately, one of the good things about opera is we had some other funds that we could put back into some critical areas, but one of the bad things is it underinflates the budget for a few years, and then when you have to go back to actuals, which we all knew would eventually happen, that's gonna skew the averages for a while.
So that actual and the 5-year actual are not actual because of ARPA. So we spent more than 13.6. I don't have the ARPA funds in front of us, but do we?
We just paid Tyler, in other words,
Yeah,
for-
out of
About
ARPA.
that 10,000.
with
the
38,000. We
Yeah.
just paid for that out
I
of
have one other
ARPA.
area that's going to have a big jump is Microsoft Office in next year expires, 2019
Oh, I
version.
know, Microsoft.
And they're going to a subscription base. We pay right now $4.50, and they're gonna mandate that we buy our Excel and other office products through a subscription base, which is gonna jump us up from $4 to over $20 per user per month per machine. So we have over 100 computers,
Don't get me
so
going
it's-
on Microsoft.
so Microsoft's gonna, a large chunk of that is Microsoft increases.
I have the same line of question on the telephone. Why the large increase in that?
The 15100, is that the one you're asking about?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do, we're putting in a brand new phone system. We're going from the old analog system that's out of date. We only can get parts for it right now through eBay and Amazon. That's how old it is. So, and the new one is a digital system, and that digital system, the way it works, if Bob Connery was here, he could explain it to you, but it's going to require RCC to have increase their number of lines down there, at the dispatch center. And because of that's part of the increase. And then I think you usually add a 10% increase per year anyways. So between the 10% increase and the additional lines for RCC dispatch, that's the increase.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is Spillman included in this, in the IT, or is that under the?
That's actually under the sheriff department.
Any other question? We'll entertain a motion of some sort.
Move to accept Mark Blanchett.
I just,
Except which, or what?
yeah, because if you intend, like you have in the other departments, to make any change in the percentage on the
On salary.
Paul knows what I'm
Yep.
referring to.
Yeah.
Because right now, the commissioners is at 3.2 and the department heads at 7, so if we want to make any changes there.
Well, like I said, all the department heads agreed on that 6%, which is,
No, but I need to hear from.
Okay.
Paul Bissonnette, I'll move to accept the commissioner's recommendation with the amendment of, to change the IT director's salary line to the 90,505 if I do it right. And then, of course, the line below.
Do I have a second?
Norm Bamford, second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Item 10.
Want to get the full 10 minutes of
You get the full 10 minutes.
nothing.
Let me start my timer.
I have 3 people with me that hopefully will answer some of the questions you may have, may not, so because they will help me with the budget. With the jacket on, that's Chief Deputy Bill Burch. This is Patrol Lieutenant Dakota Dupree, and that's a jail administrator, Tim Richardson. So when we get down to some of those things, we may ask them the question.
Do you have any opening?
You know, I'm available for, I guess I just would agree with what Chuck just said about the department heads and talked about the 6%. I put that in there at the beginning of my salary because I put in traditionally what the increase is with the union contracts. So that's why mine had 6 in it already.
Okay, under revenues. Department head and the commissioners concur on the amount of $30,500.
Kathleen, don't move.
Nina second. So I watched tonight.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On expenses, department head is stating $2,888,081, and the commissioners are $2,881,406.
in your budget books, you get the memo that, from the sheriff's department explaining differences, right?
We get it on the side bar.
You do there also, yeah.
There's something in here.
Yeah, yeah, there was a memo that.
It's after the budget. Okay. Yeah, do you want discussion first, or would you like a motion?
Well, I'd like to have some discussion, all right, I guess. See if we can come to something.
Well, I think the obvious question probably is, I don't want to assume I know the answer, but I know we've talked a lot in years past about state police doing things they used to do, not doing things anymore, but let's not make assumptions. There's a request for $138,000 plus for 2 new deputies. Talk about why we need 2 new deputies.
Because covering what we have, we were in a tough situation this year. We had one deputy that was out with an injury, was not work related, but was out from the last day of December and just came back the first day of September. So we really didn't have, we ran short there. We also had 2 deputies that were out for a period of time as they had new babies. So it's difficult to fill those. We're still obligated to cover 2 slots, day and night, and our caseload has gone up. Excuse me. 2023 went to 7,824, an increase of 2,436 calls since I've been sheriff. So, you know, we just need help. And it's
Could you repeat those numbers?
which ones?
Your call numbers?
The call volume, 7,824.
Last year, yep.
And that's up from, do you have a number?
It's the year before, I don't have that one right here with me, but the year before it was 6,500 and something. This year, we just, as of today, we just jumped over 6,000, so we're gonna be dangerously close to what we had last year, this year, with another quarter to go.
You said 2 slots too? You got
Yeah,
3
we
slots
still
too.
cover 2 slots. Now, Lieutenant Dupree was able to negotiate with the state police an arrangement where we don't split our crew up as much as we used to. We have 3 slots, so we have 2 weeks where our people are back to back, so that if they need help, they don't have to come from the other side of the county. Then we have 2 weeks where they are split up. So the state police has agreed with that. I don't know what their manpower is going to be another year. They do the best they can with what they have, and we do the best we can with what we have. But it comes to a point where, you have to say, uncle, what are you going to do? They're still promoting more people. It seems like every day I see that they promoted someone else. And sergeants and corporals, don't handle complaints for the state police. They're just there as supervisors, and if it's a 2-person call, they'll go to help with this 2-person call, but the day-to-day, they don't handle that. So as you increase, another example there is that it's tough. It's tough to fill those slots.
But by statute, they're supposed to, right?
That's correct.
Studying the statute. And back to the slots. The negotiation for the slots, is they 2 particular slots? In other words, who's the unlucky slot? Or is it rotating?
Yeah, it rotates. We'll have,
So my slot's not going to be neglected, right?
no, your slot is not going to be collected. We still know how to get Stony Brook. We do, and State Police doesn't handle any complaints down there.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, and they, they will respond if they have someone available, if we need help and those types of things. But as far as me saying tomorrow, there's gonna be a trooper handling complaints in slot 1, I can't tell you that because it won't be there. It'll be us.
Yeah. I may speak.
Yep. go ahead.
So what I was, to sum up what Sheriff was saying, the big difference in staffing here is that we divide the county up into 3 slots for those that aren't familiar. Geographically, depending on if you look at a map, essentially it'd be south, central, and north, theoretically. And the big change here, additionally, why we're asking for those 2 positions as Sheriff has stated, can be directly correlated back to those calls for service, but that big change came in 2022 when our call sharing with the state police shifted. And we went from covering half the county to covering 2/3. And so that shift in that 16% is why you see that jump in calls for service in that time period. And in that same time, we did not grow proportionally with staffing for the amount of calls that we then took on for those additional calls. So right now, we have our deputies handling more calls for service per deputy that we have in the last 10, 15 years. And so we're looking to address that to bring it back down to a more manageable rate per deputy. And that's ultimately the additional request, coupled with the fact that when you have deputies out for paternity leave or out that are injured, or in the most recent scenario 3 weeks ago, where we had an officer-involved shooting, those are times where those deputies are out on leave, and ultimately we still have those obligations to the public to provide those law enforcement services and cover 2/3 of the county. And so to be able to do that under those circumstances, in those scenarios, we're obligated to do so. And we have to do that oftentimes by means of forcing overtime shifts or things like that. So these 2 additional positions would help curb that.
Scott, is there a minimum contact per month per deputy?
Minimum contact.
Yeah, in other words, must they have X amount of contacts with the public?
We have, and we started out with 30. What we were running into is that we felt that the staff was in here too much. We want them out on the road, even, they have computers. They can park somewhere by the fairgrounds, and do their work on their laptop and that kind of stuff. We want them stopping and visiting with the schools. We want them stopping and visiting with the town managers and those types of things. It's not just traffic stops, which traffic, as far as traffic complaints, is probably as big a total that we have of anything.
How much of those public contacts are part of the 7824 calls?
I can answer that, sure. So the calls for service, that 7,800 that you referenced in 23, none of that would be impacted by these contacts that you're referencing. This is something that we've implemented in recent months in 2024. With that being said, a very small portion. And what I can explain in that regard is those contacts that we're asking our deputies to have. Ultimately, the public are people that expect those services from us. That's exactly that. They want deputies to be visible and have these services provided to them. So those contacts aren't simply that we're telling deputies they have to go out there and stop 30 cars. What that looks like is it's either we offered it up and made it very broad with the deputies because we just ultimately want them to interact with the public. So that would mean anything that counters those 30s. And it's not a hard number that we hold people to, but it is an expectation. So that could be by means of stopping in at a local school. It could be by means of stopping in at a town office, a traffic stop, and things like that. Those traffic stops are not any part of the calls for service that you see. Anytime that something that may be count as a call for service out of that 7,800 that you'd be referencing, although that's a 2023 number, would be if that deputy went out and they stopped in at a school. Sure, they do draw a call for service to document that, yes, we are stopping in at schools, or, stopping in and addressing any complaints that a school may have or any concerns, or interacting with the kids in a positive light. So those 30 contacts aren't that we're simply saying to guys, you gotta go out, you gotta stop 30 cars this month. It's to get them to interact with the public and in some ways in a positive respect.
And we're not saying these 30 contacts, you have to go out, write 30 summonses and stuff. There's no
No,
caveat.
I wasn't implying summonses.
No, but I'm just saying, I just want to put the record that that's not what we're telling them to do.
But a very small percentage. Do I have a definite number to answer your question? No, but I would say, I would go out on a limb and say that you're looking at probably under 100 in 2024.
And the reason I ask, because you give the number of new, cost of new employees was at 138 and change, I believe.
I believe it was.
And that's just wages. That doesn't include a
Benefits.
cruiser, equipment, benefits, so on and so forth.
No, those are in separate lines.
Right, I understand that, but if you add all of those together, if you take them out of those lines, the true cost of a couple deputies, including the cruiser and equipment and so on, that's going to approach what, 3.5, 400,000?
No, what did we come up with for a number?
So you are correct that 138 would strictly be wages, and you do have to account for things like fringe benefits and stuff like that. What we've discussed in ways to, could it get up into the threes? Yes, if you bought new cruisers and everything up front. We're not looking at doing that in order to mitigate costs. We would be maintaining or keeping one of our cruisers that we would put as a spare. We keep that on the front lines for another year. We'd utilize a spare cruiser in those regards. That's how we would mitigate the upfront costs, not to say, we're asking for 300,000. That's the reason we aren't asking for 300,000, because we're mitigating those upfront costs. Over time, if you were looking at maintaining a deputy's position, a single deputy, for example, anywhere on wages, you're probably looking somewhere in the vicinity of low 60,000 or mid 60s. You do have fringe benefits, and with the current cost of cruisers, we do cycle out cruisers on about a 4-year rotation right now per deputy, depending on how many miles that deputy may drive or the condition of that vehicle. So you're probably looking at a breakdown of a cruiser cost of about $17,000, $18,000 a year per deputy for that cruiser cost. If you're talking about turning over a cruiser, that's what it would break down to each year.
You're low. You're really low on that. If you get a new cruiser and equipment, it's gonna run you 100.
A new cruiser right now outfitted is running us about 73,000.
That's with everything in, all the lights, the siren, the computers, everything in it.
So
For
that
73?
73 would be your decals, your lights. We do have radios already that we are utilizing. So things like your radios and your laptops, we do currently have. But that would be your laptop stand, your lights, your decals, the cruiser itself.
And that's assuming that the equipment will fit from one model year to another.
Nope, that's brand new equipment, 73,000. That's what we just currently paid for our last cruisers, three, 4 months ago.
Okay, and that's just the cruiser?
That's the cruiser, decals, lights. That's the cruiser outfitting.
Computer, cages,
That's the gauge. Yep. That's not the computer. We already have computers that we utilize.
the only reason I drive with this, the overall budget is a 35% increase in the county budget. Last year, 17%.
Yep.
Those are pretty heady increases. And any place that I can find where we aren't billing the county resident, for taxes, they are getting 17 and 34% increases every year. I don't know if any of you, well, I'm sure some of you have sat through a tax abatement hearing in your locality. I've done it three or four times. They're tough. when people come in and say, I can't afford the taxes. It really makes you want to take your wallet out and say, here, how much? And that's what I'm trying to head off here, is a huge increase in the budget. And to hire 2 new deputies, in my mind, if a vehicle is good enough to be given to a new deputy out of the, what's it called, the pool, the spare,
We utilize 4 spares at times.
why would, if it's good enough for that deputy, why was it put into the spare pool to begin with, if it's still serviceable?
So to answer that question, we have 4 spares that we utilize. We take a rotation of our vehicles to replace cruisers as our cruisers get up there in mileage and we turn over cruisers. We maintain 4 in our spares. Now those 4 spares to say, if your stance would be, well, run 2 spares, less vehicles you have to maintain and keep vehicles on the front line longer. My response to that would be that there's often times where we need those 4 spares. We need to utilize those 4 spares for the last 3 or 4 weeks. I can tell you that I've had 0 spares available because we've been utilizing all 4 of our spares, whether vehicles are in receiving maintenance, whether vehicles are having service done, or are broken down, whatever it may be. For the last month, I haven't had really any spares available because all 4 have been utilized. So it is important to maintain having 4 spares. As far as keeping cruisers on the front line longer, if you look at what we are looking at proposing, or what we have proposed to cycle out cruisers this year in comparison to recent years, we have maintained keeping them a little bit longer. I know the commissioners have voiced keeping those cruisers for a long period of time, especially when we made the transition to the Chevy Tahoes versus the Ford Explorers. And that is our intentions. I set forward a proposal to the commissioners about a month and a half ago outlining that. And our full intentions there were to do that in a manner to utilize ARPA funds, since it was going away, to cushion the cost of taxpayers moving forward, where we wouldn't have a need again to purchase vehicles until 2026. So I'm trying to utilize ARPA in addition with keeping our turnover and
How many were bought with the ARPA funds?
what was that?
How many units were bought with ARPA?
We have currently, Commissioner meetings, maybe 2 or 3 ago, we have 5 that was approved for. Over the course of the entire ARPA funds, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
But those 5 are gonna have to be replaced the same year down the road, correct?
Not necessarily. The reason why I say that is because depending on who those vehicles go to or where they are within our department, there's certain individuals such as admin, like ourselves, we don't drive as much as that road deputy. So our vehicles, theoretically speaking, like the current ones, get replaced anywhere from 5 to 6 years versus a road guy that their vehicle gets replaced anywhere from 3 to 4 years. It simply depends on where that person is working, what their role is, and how often they drive. It's not every 4 years your vehicle is going to get replaced. It strictly depends on the condition of the vehicle and the mileage of the vehicle. So there are some vehicles that are 3 or 4 years old that do get replaced, and then there's others that are 6 years old that get replaced.
The vehicle that, if you were to get the 2 new employees, the vehicle that they're given out of the pool, out of the spare pool, a year down the road, they get, if you buy 2 new ones, is it assumed that it goes to them?
Not necessarily. Again, it's going to depend on mileage and condition of vehicles that we have at that time. I would anticipate looking to replace, again, with the use of ARPA funds, looking to cushion the taxpayers after 2025. We will not be anticipating buying vehicles again until 26. At that time, I would anticipate in 2026 replacing 4 vehicles. And at that time, it's simply going to depend on the mileage of the current vehicles that we have and the condition of those vehicles, depending. That's ultimately what's going to depend on who those vehicles are assigned to. It may be those additional positions, and it may not be. just to give you a blanket answer would be accurate, because it's gonna ultimately depend on the condition of the fleet.
Thank you.
I have a question on the reserve provision, Sheriff. That's the largest increase, line item increase in the budget. $250,000 is budgeted. What is that number and how's that developed?
That's the cost of four fully outfitted, and we put that number in there because that's what we need. And
There wasn't the cost of 4 fully outfitted, but we thought that that was the big reason there is that because we did run into this issue that we're reintroducing, as Administrator Kruger said with IT, is that we did scale back the funding for budget lines with the use of ARPA funds, which was great for us. But now with ARPA funds ending and we have to reintroduce those funds, ideally, the cost of, we're looking at $73,000 for an outfitted vehicle times 4, we're looking at 292, I believe, right in that ballpark. So if I do the math off the top of my head. So we didn't go to the full cost. We looked at 250 because ultimately excuse me.
No, there's a little bit of money in the G account,
Yes,
so we're
correct.
just
Yep.
building up.
And so that's why we went with that 250. And the reasoning being is because that in conjunction with a little bit of, or with the money that we have in our current reserve account, for the next foreseeable, 5 years or so, we aren't gonna come back and ask for that full 300,000. We could stay somewhere at that baseline of 250 and possibly pull a little bit from the reserve account each year to help supplement that, rather than come in and ask for the full thing, or basically trying to ease us back into the budgeting for that without coming out with the BAC.
So that's to set aside money for
It'd be 20,
future use, for future purchase of vehicles, right?
that would be correct.
Okay.
So you don't have anything in here for purchase of vehicle?
That would be the purchase of vehicles. However, because the way we have structured it to ease the taxpayers for the next foreseeable 5 years or so, by utilizing ARPA funds for this last round of vehicles needed, that would be the purchase for vehicles. However, we aren't going to need vehicles in 2025, not again until 26. So that amount for vehicles would be working capital for the future to purchase vehicles.
Okay, but we're looking at, for conversation, $250,000 a year going forward in the budget for vehicles.
Yes, correct. And there are scenarios or years where I anticipate it would be somewhere around 300,000 needed. So rather than, we would have some reserve funds to be able to pull from rather than needing to come to that full 300.
Yeah.
I guess my issue is that, we sit and we go back and forth with this, but what's happened we're being cost shifted onto. The state police has pulled out, and 1502 says specific powers and duties of state police shall be to patrol the state highways and other important ways, arrest for motor vehicle driven and horse-drawn vehicles too. Fred.
you're not thinking of making those cruises, are
I'm just
you?
telling you, it's everything on the road they're supposed to be doing, and that's not what's happening. So a good portion of this is trying to, deal with what's being cost shifted onto us for the patrolling part of it. And I just took your numbers. If you're 78 or whatever it is, 365, that's 22 calls a day. For your slots, that's a lot of calls.
Yep.
So, and that's a lot of maneuvering around that you don't have, right now you've got what, state police or whatever it was. So, that's an incredible workload to me. How do you manage all that? And the other ones aren't around. So I don't like seeing it because I don't like, it's making our, town tax bills. And we've discussed this before, is keep going up and going up and going up. And, I just want to make sure that people are on Zoom or whatever, understand what's happening and what the state's not paying for. or coming up with some sort of revenue thing, because between that and the jail, it's shifting on to us.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and you mentioned the jail. The Department of Corrections budget went up 10% for this year, and county's got that much more. So obviously, it doesn't cost as much for us to feed people and pay for electricity and stuff as it does the state. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about, Kathleen, is that whatever they can shuffle back to us, they do. And there's really, most of the time, not much discussion on it. Just go, if they change the standards, something in the jail, we really, most of the time, don't have much of an opportunity to discuss it and negotiate. This is the way it is, this is, this is the cost and so forth. Tim can address that a little bit when we get to the jail, but you're 100% correct, there's more and more stuff shuffled back to the counties. To do that, I guess what you have to do is decide what are you willing to fund. I mean, I put this budget together, or we put this budget together of what we would like to have. We understand we're not gonna get everything. It's not Christmas, and we understand that as taxpayers, we are too. So, but we've got to make sure that our crew can keep up with the work. And, if it was me, I'd go work for the state police in Hancock County.
They're higher.
There they are. They are. So. And I should say that 250,000 we put in there. There was a plan that was put together that this would be the last year that we would purchase cruises with ARPA funds. So if the commissioners stay with that, then if you need to adjust that a little bit, if you think 250 is too much, that's fine. But if we have to buy them out of the budget, that's where we're going to need to have that and take some out of the reserve that we have. So
The last thing I would say too, in respect to the cruisers, is that 73,000 number that I had given you, that was for the cruiser fully owned. That's the lights, the decals, and everything, as I had mentioned. That being said, a lot of the reasoning for that $73,000 cost was because we did transition from Ford Explorers to Chevy Tahoes. With this last order, we should be primarily swapped over our entire fleet to the Chevy Tahoes. So moving forward, theoretically, that should be a little bit of a reduced cost, not significant, but it should be reduced to some extent that we will be able to reuse some of the equipment that we currently have in a Chevy Tahoe. As we start to cycle those over, we'll be able to repurpose some of that equipment that was not an option for us from taking the equipment from Ford Explorer and moving it to a Chevy Tahoe. We didn't have that ability because a lot of that equipment was not compatible or did not fit since the different cabin sizes, et cetera. So that's why we have that full upfront cost out for the Chevy Tahoe, where moving forward, that cost should be mitigated to some degree. And to speak on the 22 calls for service a day that Kathleen had referenced, a lot of those calls, I'd just like to remind you that some of those calls may be domestics, they may be dead bodies, they may be burglaries, they may be things like that do occupy deputies' time outside of just 10 minutes. Some of those investigations may take hours or days. With that being said, we also do cover a large geographic area, so it also requires that travel time for the deputy to respond to those areas. So there is a lot more time that is consumed by those calls for service. The other thing in that respect to the additional positions, which a lot of this conversation seems to revolve around, is ultimately what you want for those law enforcement services, where we do cover 2/3 of the county. If we have 2 or 3 deputies working, and there's oftentimes, or many times, where there's a call for service, for example, down in Deer Isle or Stonington, that requires 2 deputies or sometimes 3. And the kind of the ugly reality behind it is that if we're covering slots 1 and 3, so we're responsible for that Deer Isle, Stonington area, but we're also responsible for the Gouldsboro, Winter Harbor, Route 9 area. Ultimately, if we need assistance and we need to pull that guy for backup or for another deputy, well, all our deputies are down at Deer Isle, Stonington. If that person calls in Franklin and needs help, we'll certainly be on our way, but you're gonna have to understand it's gonna take us a little bit to get there. So it just depends on the level of service that you guys, or that the general public wants. We'll always provide it, we'll always respond, we'll do it to the best of our abilities. But that is what we are handcuffed by. That's the reality behind it.
You know, and another example, as we all know, that this yellow flag, red flag is very much in the news. To deal with a case that would Maine has the yellow flag law, if a deputy has that and has to go through that whole process, that's gonna take realistically almost all of that deputy's shift that day. So if they have one, say, 7 o'clock in the morning, it comes in, they may not be able to cover any more complaints, so we have to pick that up somehow. We've been able, Chief Birch has helped with some of them, and patrol lieutenants helped with some of them, but they have their own duties and responsibility as well, so. Again, we put this budget together on what we would like to have. But that's certainly up to you folks on what you do.
Is this new agreement with the state police, is that reflected in this budget?
The new agreement about us being together for 2 weeks and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
that's been in place, Dakota, what, most of the, since probably June.
No, I think we enacted it, if I remember right, it was September 1st. We enacted it. It does go through until the end of the year, at which time we have negotiations to hopefully rectify a new agreement.
But the dollar figure for cutting down what you would have had to do if they hadn't is in here.
So this is staying status quo with covering 2/3. The state has assured us that in talking with the command staff and the troop that covers this area, they have assured us that they will stay status quo with covering 1/3 of the county for 2025. What that particular third of the county looks like is yet to be determined upon these negotiations. We do have a current agreement in place that will last through the end of the year.
So that agreement is new,
That the agreement that
the
we have.
1/3 agreement, we'll call it.
That agreement was made in 2022, which is why you've seen these jumps in calls for service from 22 to 23. That's why you see that jumps in calls for service is because we started covering, went from half to 2/3 of the county. But the agreement that we started in September 1st, that is not new in the sense of we're covering 2/3. It's new in the sense of we've come to an agreement to hopefully better provide a service to the citizens of Hancock County, depending on what we're covering or where we're covering geographically. That's the agreement that we made, is we're still covering 2/3 like we were before. The difference being is before we're split half of the time. The agreement before is we always covered slot 1, and then we would rotate between slots 2 and 3. The current agreement that we have with the state police is that we always cover slot 1, and we cover slot 2 for 2 weeks at a time, while they cover slot 3, and then we swap between 2 and 3, so they cover slot 2 for 1 week, we cover slot 3 for 1 week, and then we go back to slot 2 for 2 weeks. What it did ultimately is that instead of our deputies being split completely on opposite sides of the county half of the year, now they're only split 33% of the year. So it was a way, while it's not a substantial gain, it was a gain hopefully for the service that we're able to provide to some extent.
And really, agreement is kind of a word that really doesn't explain the way it went. It was effective this date, we're only gonna cover 1/3 and you're gonna cover 2/3. It really wasn't much of an agreement. It said, this is what we're gonna do. You guys are gonna have to figure out what you're gonna have to do yourself. So, but we still have discussions with state police. They are robbing departments right and left. They are hiring academy graduates for departments everywhere. And they are very actively, like Fred said, they're very actively out recruiting to do that.
And they only do a few functions now too.
Well, the big answer is we have all these specialties that we have to fill, the TAC team and the dive team and so forth and so on. But, I don't understand the theory of continuing to promote and take people out of an already small patrol contingent that you have. So once you get the magic stripes, you don't handle complaints. So.
I'm kind of curious, why the switch to the Chevy Tahoe?
So the reason for that was a couple things. Actually, believe it or not, the Chevy Tahoe gets better gas mileage than the Ford Explorer. I'll say that. But
I like it.
yeah, so the Chevy Tahoe actually gets better gas mileage. There is with times and the more equipment that we're required to carry, it also has a larger cabin space, so it is nice in that regard, and it's a little bit more comfortable. But also the longevity. We were finding that the Fords, once they hit about 100,000 miles, we were dumping significantly more maintenance in them and versus the Tahoes. The other thing is, though, is a big factor behind it is the resale value. So that 4-year mark, or when we hit that 120,000 miles, and we started turning vehicles in or trading them in or selling, we were selling the Ford Explorers, and we're seeing we were getting about $4,000 to $5,000, sometimes a little bit more, fluctuating depending on the condition of it or the miles for that Ford Explorer, where we were seeing a significant more return to the tune of, anywhere from 10, 12,000 or more for the Chevy Tahoe. So a little bit of additional upfront cost, you were gaining more than in the end result when it came time to turn it in for. There have been some agencies, we haven't done it. There are some companies that do like the fuel studies and how much you save on the gas mileage and things like that, if you want to factor every little penny from every angle. But ultimately, it was the resale value, the space within the cabin, the maintenance costs. When you also have a bigger vehicle, also the safety components behind that as well. For a multitude of different reasons, it seemed to be more beneficial, and that's why other agencies surrounding us, like Ellsworth, has got some Chevy Tahoes, Penobscot County swapped the Chevy Tahoes. There are more agencies that have done that.
Notice that.
Yes.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Could you clarify the 7,800 calls, is that just the sheriff's? That doesn't include the third that the state police is covering? Okay. If you, and maybe I misunderstood you, but you're having a hard time responding to the 7,800 calls, but in addition to those 22 or whatever calls a day that you're getting, you're also asking your deputies to go out to schools and visit with.
Yep.
Why add that additional work if you're already having a hard time making
We're getting questioned by the public. We never see you. Where are you? What are you doing? So it is.
question? Can I ask?
No,
like, you
you're
know me,
fine.
you come up to Augusta all the time.
Yep.
I see you regularly, and I keep hearing from sheriffs all over the state that this is a hardship for them, that the state police going back on these contracts that they entered to, or these agreements, cost sharing agreements they entered to in the mid to late 90s, has increased the burden on county sheriffs across rural Maine, I'll say, not so much Cumberland or York or in the deep south down there. But I haven't heard, no one has showed up to testify in front of our committee I've never heard anyone actually complain that these calls are not being responded to in a timely fashion from any member of the public in any county. So I just don't I don't understand who's complaining that you're not coming to school.
The schools,
Which is all of them.
not all of them, but we have, when somebody's patrolling, say, slot 1, you've got Blue Hill, you've got Castine, you've got Penobscot, you've got Sedgwick, you've got Brooksville, you've got New York, you've got Stonington. What's that, 7 schools? I mean, Brooklyn, excuse me.
Don't forget Brooklyn.
So I think that one, we do receive some complaints from some schools. I can tell you specifically, the most recent one was from the Deer and Stonington schools. But other schools also have reached out. We oftentimes have to respond to calls for service in some. So we do respond to schools for calls for service. Ultimately, by having these deputies interact with the public, a deputy works on average, depending on their schedule, a calendar month, they're usually working about 18 shifts during that month. With that being said, to have a deputy have 30 contacts 30 times throughout that month, those 18 shifts, you're talking just over 1 a day or a shift that they work, maybe about 1.5, to ask that deputy to, hey, stop into your town office. Do you guys have any problems? What's going on? How can we better help you? Stop into that school and say, hey, speak with the kids or whatnot. or whether that be a traffic stop. While I understand what you're saying, why ask the deputies to do that? The best answer that I can give you is one, because the public wants to see us in the service that they're paying for. They want to see that. We do have that. We do have people that make those complaints, or school officials that have complained to us or said, hey, could you make a presence in the schools? Could you be in this school zone during this time? Could you help us out with this or that?
Leaving, like when classes are dismissing, you're watching GSA kids pull out from it. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that we stressed with the patrolmen, is that we'd like to have you out first thing in the morning and spend some time in the school zones, and the same thing in the afternoon, spend some time in the school zones. We get,
But ultimately, what it boils back to is deterrence, right? So if you're driving down the road and you see a vehicle pulled over, are you apt to slow down a little bit? You may not know what that vehicle was pulled over, but the general deterrence factor. So if we're out there conducting traffic, right? Then the general public, oftentimes, not always, maybe there's people that don't, right? But the general perception is, okay, I'm gonna slow down a little bit. Taking speed and slowing vehicles down, that prevents traffic collisions. So while it is not going to be maybe it's not going to be a drastic difference, there is some deterrence there. Or you go and interact with those students in the school, or just stop at that town office. If you go and interact with those students, maybe you don't have that same call for service in that school when there is a law enforcement presence. So there is a deterrence factor there, which could ultimately help lower the calls for service to some extent.
Could you respond to my question would be about your call response times. And if you're actually seeing complaints about a slower response time because of the increased expectation or burden placed on the sheriff's office versus the state.
sometimes we do get those, and it all depends on what the deputy's doing at the time when this other complaint comes in. I have the CAD system up in my office so I can see what's going on, what we're doing, what Ellsworth's doing, what Bucksport's doing. We all share that Spillman reporting system. And, you may look and the deputy will be backed up 3 complaints. Well, that deputy's got to prioritize. What's the most serious complaint that I've got to go? So that out of that 3, the third one may have been the first person to call, but they don't see the deputy because they've got to prioritize the seriousness of the complaints that they have on the CAD.
And I was just gonna say in that respect as well, a lot of this time, you're talking 22 calls for service a day or something to that effect. And it's not that, one thing that you need to keep in mind, it's not every day you get 22 calls for service. There's some days we may get 6 calls for service. And then there's another day we may get 35 calls for service. So it certainly fluctuates in that regard. Ultimately, yeah, you can always boil it down and say there's an average of 22 a day, but it doesn't come that way. That's not the way in which the calls are reported. I can tell you, for example, we do get some complaints. Is it aired out there to the general public about our response times? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I know that sometimes we do get a specific complaint from an individual, or individuals are upset once we actually arrive there. I can give you an example. And this was a patrol shift that I filled in, or I had worked in June, late June, when we were still covering Tremont. That particular night, we're responsible for slots 1 and 2. I can tell you that I started my night, it was like 6:30 p.m. I went for a call for service to assist a deputy down in Stonington with a fight. From there, on my way there, we had another fight in Deer Isle. So I went to actually go to Deer Isle by myself while the other deputy was handling the fight in Stonington.
Throwing down.
So while the deputy was handling the fight in Stonington, I went to the one in Deer Isle. He transported that individual to the hospital in Blue Hill. While he was on his way back to help me in Deer Isle, I got a call for a fight in Tremont. So I left there while he finished handling the Deer Isle one. And on my way to the Tremont one, when I was going through Sedgwick, happened to be along the way, I got another disorderly or a dispute there. So I stopped along the way to handle that. And I never even made it to the Tremont one. Southwest handled it. But that's just an example of how our resources have to be allocated. And so, with that person in Tremont making a complaint, were they certainly happy with the service they provide? I can tell you that I never even got there because Southwest handled it, because I was coming from Deer Isle. That was the closest person we had. And in addition to that, I had to stop on my way in Sedgwick to handle another one. So, It's just, it's instances like that, whether they realize it or not, sometimes I don't know, but we do receive some calls or complaints.
How many deputies do you have?
We told we have total.
Total right now, including admin, our detectives, our Swans Island deputy, things like that. We are sitting at 21.
And Northern Field Troop has 27 for 4 counties, right?
I had no idea how many
Hancock,
we have right
Washington,
now.
Aroostook, and Piscataqua County.
I have no idea.
The one thing that I would say that is a little bit different in their regard, and I won't badmouth them because it's just how they're structured different, is for the sheriff's office, we have our administration, right? You have the sheriff, you have the chief, the lieutenant. We complete the day-to-day functions, which the Northern Field Troop, a lot of they have their lieutenant, but a lot of, which completes the day-to-day functions. But then they also have their command staff that's not included in the Northern Field Troop. So while they have their command staff that isn't directly included in the Northern Field Troop, that number of 21 is also included in our command staff here at the sheriff's office. In addition to that, obviously, we cover the 2 slots in Hancock County. They cover the 1, I believe they cover 2 slots in Scott, I believe, maybe 2 or 3. They don't cover any in Washington. So while they cover 4 counties, they don't have any responsibilities in Washington. Yes, sometimes they do assign a person, sometimes they don't. They have, I believe, 2 slots in Penobscot. Again, they don't have anybody in Scottiquist, although they probably have a deputy that or a trooper that floats through. So out of those 4 counties, they don't have a person specifically assigned that's taking calls in Washington or Penobscot or Scottiquist. It's just 2 out of the 4 that they actually man. And out of 27, I think they're only covering 3 slots total between the 4 counties.
And they're mandated by statute that they have to cover those 2 slots regardless of Penobscot County. So if they're shorthanded, they only have 2 people, they would have to be in Penobscot County. That was passed
They
legislation that
can
was
change it,
passed.
they just have to give a 1-year heads up.
That agreement ends, I believe, in December of this year.
Back in,
But they also, I mean, but if you get called to a homicide, so sometimes just find a dead body, you can't go to the state police anyway. So there are calls that you receive that you have to hand off. Correct.
So the only ones that we would receive that we hand off are homicides.
What about computer crimes?
Computer crimes, our detectives will handle like child porn cases or sex assaults like that. Computer crimes does assist upon request with like executed search warrants or the download of the material from the electronic devices.
And they will respond with the AG's office, excuse me, if there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
We don't, we're out of that. We may respond just like we did recently.
you full staff now?
Sorry.
We are right now.
You've got 50,000 going to buyout,
Yes.
7275,
Excuse me?
line
Yes, I see it.
7275,
Yep.
50,000 for buyout.
Yes.
You anticipate, of course, to spend that money on buying out?
We may have to.
What's the average cost of buyout now?
For, it's 5-year
5 years.
decreasing, then it goes. I believe the first year is 47,000 and change. If the person hasn't completed 1 year's employment in that, and it goes down incrementally from there. Depending on where they shake out on that list is what it's gonna cost you. The last 2 deputies that we hired, we were fortunate we did not have to have any pie out. We have a deputy out on Swans Island now. He came from Penobscot County and there was no cost in there. And the other patrol deputy that we hired came from Androscoggin County, and he moved up here because his wife was a nurse practitioner in Southwest Harvard, and he had 6 or 7 years, so we didn't have any, but who's to say, we just don't get the applications that we will be used to, or nobody does.
And so if the 2 new deputies requested in the budget came to fruition, And let's say they're both in their first year. Then $50,000 is not gonna cut it. Correct. Then what?
Well, then it was one of those things that you either hire one and pay it off or try to figure something else out. You know, I've asked the commissioners to, when we wanted to buy somebody out for some funds from other accounts that were there. But I couldn't imagine trying to hire two deputies that were, you know, in that price range that you're talking. It's just, that bothers me. And it goes up every year. The academy sets what the price is.
Yeah, that's the tuition at the academy, isn't it?
No, the tuition at the academy just went up $500. But it's what the cost they figure to train somebody for paying that person to go through the 18 weeks academy and those types of things. So, yeah, it's costly.
That's what the academy figures is the, for lack of a better word, the fully encumbered cost that an agency would spend when they factor in the cost of the academy, the equipment, the wages, and the training.
Yep.
That's what the academy, that's the number that they say on average, you know, obviously it's gonna depend on where you are in the state and the wages, but on average, this is what we figure is an equitable cost that an agency would invest in this person. So they should be compensated if somebody would get hired and they have that amount of years.
Gotcha.
Quick question, I think.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to reduce the overtime budget with the, if we were to hire 2 new deputies? It's up, it's gone from 105 last year to 125 in this year's budget, an increase of 19. I was wondering if they're,
We went up with that based on the 6% pay cost for the union contract next year, the raises for the deputies. So, you know, certainly that's something we could look at, I guess.
I think that's something that's certainly doable, just to piggyback off what Sheriff Payne said, that 6%, but ultimately, we just remember, we had to take into account that it is a 6% wage increase, but when you're paying it out for overtime purposes at time and a half, it's actually 9%. So that's why we factored that, really looking at a 9% increase for wages. But then there is some extra there to increase that line. If you're looking at what we have spent to date, we actually did earlier today. We do anticipate, I believe we're already at 102 so far this year, but we were coupled by, you know, an officer involved shooting, a deputy out for an injury, a couple deputies that had families that were started in maternity leave, things like that. So with 2 additional deputies, it is possible where we could mitigate some of that overtime that was needed or forced. We could mitigate that up to some potential ratio.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's worth examining where the 5-year actual is 93. If you're gonna bring on 2 additional people, you would think, or you know it better than me, but then you would, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, okay, well then could we reduce the overtime? I'm just gonna say a number, just about $90,000 instead of the 125. Then you're gaining back 30. Well, that's $35,000 to put towards the deputy. Deputies. I just wonder if that's not worthy of consideration. Other than that, I guess the only other point I would make is the whole representing a community that has a police force and a resource officer, et cetera. And I look through this budget and I see communities who, I think communities that are opting to use the sheriff's service, I think so, at some point do have to come to the realization that the sheriff's department is being spread thin here. And to expect them to be able to visit schools with the regularity that a police force like Ellsworth or Bucksport might be able to is unreasonable to some degree.
Well, you bring up a good point. In our district, we have, what? 3, well, Mount Desert, Bar Harbor, and Southwest. Tremont now all have their own law enforcement. So, representing my district, I'm looking at it saying they're gonna have to pay for it. Ellen's gonna have to pay for it. You have your own police department. Roxbury, Schoolsboro.
I understand what the sheriff and his deputies are trying to do, right? They're, at the end of the day, they're running a business and they wanted, and to be proactive and to be in schools and do those types of things. You want to see that. I'm not knocking what they're putting forward, but I'm just saying, when it comes down to the bottom line.
I hear what you're saying.
I don't feel like I'd be representing Bucksport very well if I didn't say, you know what, I think probably on your list of priorities, school visits. If you would like school visits, you could have a resource officer and a full-time police force like Ellsworth or Bucksport or other communities choose to. As opposed to increasing the budget to the level that we're talking about. And I know I'm being a little dramatic here on purpose, but I just feel like that's something that has to be said. I also understand what the sheriff is trying to, is saying with the caseload and just the cost of having a deputy or hiring a deputy right now. But I do feel like the overtime line should be reviewed as well. I feel like that would set the tone to be able to say, listen, there's not going to be as much overtime. And the reason for that is because we've hired 2 new deputies in order to accommodate things like the leaves and all of the things that we have to do. And I'm sure that if overtime actually is warranted, then it's going to wait too.
Well, you have to remember the overtime, a lot of the overtime is the cost of covering shift on day, on vacation time, sick time. So if you hire 2 more deputies, then they have vacation time.
That's a good point. That is a good
And
point.
sick
You're right.
time is gotta be covered as well. So you aren't gonna cut your
That is a good point.
overtime down.
The other thing is too is, you know, for our smaller communities, I mean, we probably, because of our valuation, pay way more of a share. You know, and I'm not trying to argue with you. And the other thing
No.
is too, for the school fund, and I'd like to be able to see more, but we're paying as much of the local share now because we don't get to 55%. You know, we just aren't able to do it sometimes. So everybody's got something different. That's our big challenge.
Well, if you're looking to cut this somehow, the only way I can see to cut it is to cut one of the positions, make it a 1 position addition to.
On the overtime, it isn't 6%, it's 19%.
Yeah, it's up 19%.
Yeah, so it's not 6%.
No, but if you're hiring 2 more deputies, then you have to cover their vacation time and their sick time.
Yeah,
So,
you know, I'm not arguing that, I'm just saying that it was stated there was a 6% increase, it's not, it's 19.
and if you look at,
And on the K-9 overtime, it's not 6%, it's 31%.
but you also got to look at the vehicle expense as well. Not, yes, you're taking it one out of your spare pool now, but eventually you're gonna have to replace. So, down the road, this is in perpetuity.
To cut to the bottom line, as far as the calls, are there any calls now going unanswered?
There better not be.
And I still don't get the need for the ask for the two new positions. I really don't.
Now, building off what Nina was saying about complaints, perhaps people don't know to whom they can complain to after they've already expressed their frustration to an officer. Back in June, when we had a very contentious town meeting, we had requested the sheriff's presence. They couldn't get there until it was almost over, and then they got there, and then they got called away like right away, and everybody was frustrated, and everybody was upset. But, you know, we understood that they're spread thin. So that was the situation where there was definitely a lot of complaining, but to whom do we talk to? and what could be done about it.
We've had bills to this, to that try to get at this issue with the call sharing agreements being terminated by the state police and the legislature. There's a number of them. Sheriff Kennedy came down and was present for a number of them. But not a single person came to testify about their frustrations with the amount of time it took for someone to show up.
Wait, but how many times do people come down to testify anyways? Not very often. Not very often.
I guess I would just think that if,
Most people don't know, and a lot of people are trying to work.
I understand- I
mean, they
understand
can't
that.
go
I
down to
understand that.
Augusta to visit you, to have a day-long conversation, to basically end up being told, we care about you, but we're not gonna change anything.
I guess I would just assume that the sheriffs might bring from all over the state, I'm not like putting this on you, Scott, but
Yeah, I
all
know.
over the state, they might come and bring people, like, this is an example of a person who had a, or even have them draft testimony and bring it with them, have the sheriff show up and read the testimony of someone who had a poor experience where something bad happened because they weren't able to
Keep a
respond.
complaint log.
A complaint log.
I had somebody show me how to do that. And it wasn't anything that I picked up in school. I had somebody mention it. You guys have always been great if you've gone up there with it, or if I've emailed testimony, but I tell you, it's a communication and a skill set
Yes,
that is not taught in the schools. I've been advocating, I want to see civics in there because the younger folks I see don't know it's a local, state, or federal. And it's frustrating for them. And also too, they get intimidated by coming out because they're not taught public speaking. I just tell them, just say it like it is. What's the most they're gonna do? Throw you out through the door or something?
Yep.
But it is, it's a
yes, it
terrible
is.
thing.
I also lived in the community though, in a rural community with it. I would think I would be hearing, I don't know, I just feel like I'm hearing about these frustrations from sheriffs. I'm not hearing about them from the state police. No, I mean, like, not that they, but what I'm hearing from the state police is it's not as bad as what the sheriffs are making it out to seem.
They're gonna do what they wanna do, regardless of what kind of a hardship it puts on to us, which is exactly how that started, going from 50% to 2/3. They said, this is what we're doing, this is the date.
Although they may not say that they're having the same issues, and they just get approved for new positions from the legislation.
For PEC?
Or I believe one in field troop just got new positions.
Well, I will entertain a motion. We beat this to death.
I've overspent my 10 minutes.
August, I'll move that we accept the commissioner's recommendation with the modification that we add to the sheriff and deputy head the extra amount that to reflect the 6% increase rather than the cost of living increase.
That would be the department head amount,
Department head and assistant department head.
because that's what he requested was the 6%.
Yeah, but okay, I'm starting with the commissioner's recommendation overall with the adjustment for the sheriff's salary to 6% increase and the deputy chief's, deputy sheriff's salary being increased by to the 6% increase.
That's what the department
So
is.
that's the
requesting.
department, it's
Yeah.
6%.
Well, I think, just so you guys are aware, I think the difference is just, what you're saying is there were some other items down below. He said that what the commissioners are recommending, because there was some other differences, that's all. Just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Been moved.
It was good with the difference.
No, there were no other.
The only difference is benefits. If you take, on the Tom's motion, if you simply take department heads numbers, that's the motion.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a budgetary.
Yeah, that reflects down on Social Security, Medicare. The department head is requested 6%, so if you want to do that, then you should just go with the department head.
My intent was to accept the commissioner's figures, that column, with the adjustment of the first two salary line items, reflect 6%.
Which is what is
Which is-
showing
It is showing that.
in the department head column.
Yeah.
That's.
The department head had put in 6%.
Yes,
So,
but there are other changes when you go.
well,
down
the
further.
only other changes are gonna be the Medicare, FICA, which is based on salary.
Right.
Okay. Retirement, workman's comp, all the rest of it. Those are appointed costs.
Cost of doing business.
Okay,
So,
okay, so
And that
reword, so to go with the department head's recommend. Start over. I move that we accept the department head's recommendation for the 2025 budget.
$2,888,081 has been moved. Do I have a second? Kathleen seconded. Any other discussion?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
For the two positions in this budget?
That's what I was wondering, is that included in the
Yes.
department head budget?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where, are- like,
Where it says requesting two new positions on line 130.
oh, I see, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Did you get the count?
Yes,
I think what, 7,
yes,
2?
yes.
Section 12. Department head and commissioners both concur on $487,095.
Senate, move to approve.
Wilgus, I second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Expenditures just happen to be $487,095. Both the department head and the commissioners.
Senate, move to approve.
Wilgus, I second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
That was a little faster. That was a little faster.
Yeah. Civil process, 13. Revenue lines, department head and commissioners, both of 135,000. Have a motion?
Mark
So
Flinchak.
moved, sorry, go ahead.
Mark Flinchak, move to approve.
You get a million seconds.
Moved and seconded, the revenue line of $135,000 for civil process. Discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Can we get more money for paper serving?
We did last year, I believe it was last year.
Terrible inflation.
Oh, it was crazy. It was $16 and the legislature brought it up to 40, and they also have a caveat in there that the county can add up to $25 fee, and the commissioners voted to do that. So this, looking at the numbers this morning again, you know, in 10 years that I've been chair of it, this will be the first year I think we're gonna make what we said we were gonna make for revenue.
Doesn't cover your expenses, actual
No.
expenses. So
No,
That's like me with BMB, town subsidized BMBs. Not-
Kathleen knows.
I don't get Steve.
She's charged to talk to you.
I'm gonna send one else, so I can get rid of that. No cars.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Expenditures. Department head is $183,752, commissions $182,752.
Those in the holes.
It's just vehicles.
Mark, is that Matt?
Yeah, all the numbers are the same.
I've not seen a difference.
No,
I was
vehicle.
gonna say, what's the difference?
Well, yeah, vehicle is different. The department head-
Maintenance and repair.
Yeah, maintenance and repair.
Why is it double usually?
It's not Mark, it's Matt.
Order our parts on eBay.
I don't, yeah, 500 over. The price.
I have a motion.
Motion to accept the commissioner's recommendation of 182,752. Paul Bissonnette.
Wilgus, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Drug Task Force. Department head is put in for $129,004, and the commission is for $148,770. Difference being MDEA revenue. Can you explain the difference?
I can speak on that. The difference would be that 129,000 obviously is what we initially had put forward after speaking with Commissioner Clark. He had provided some insight on, I believe, be a more accurate calculation. So going off of that, that's how we came up with that 148, and I concur with his recommendation on how we came to that calculation. I think that's the more accurate number based on how the state would compensate for that position, or for those positions. That's how we got to that.
Paul Bissonnette, motion to approve the commissioner's recommendation of 148,770.
Norm Benford, second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On the expenditures, department head is $219,981, and the commission is $248,007.
Once again, this is going to be a similar instance once went off the calculations from suggestion of Commissioner Clark. What this did is it accounted for the wages, the benefits, what the state would contribute, what the county would be responsible for, and so on. I do, once again, believe that the commission's recommendations would be the accurate numbers to go off of as far as expenditures.
Kathleen, would you like to make a motion?
Well, no, I wanted to ask a question.
I'll go ahead.
What about the canine supplies? Did you get any dog food? Just blank.
That's in Department 10. We moved it to Department 10 a year or so, maybe 2 years ago.
All right, so he will be fed.
It will be
He
fed,
will be
yes.
fed.
Just now, or?
We can always count on you to stick up for our dogs.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. We go with the commissioner's figure, 248, 27.
What was it, a second?
We moved in second in discussion.
Question, since this is new, right, do I remember from last year that we just created this department because the,
No, this has been, wow, I don't know how many years it was. Last year it wasn't funded. I was shorthanded in patrol. I didn't have all my positions filled. So they didn't fill this position. So no, that's been, I guess, Commissioner Clark can tell you when it originally started, but it's been 15 years or more, Commissioner. So
I just couldn't remember what the hiccup was. There was some reason that we didn't.
I was short-handed in patrol, and I didn't have anybody to assign down there.
We had the fund that we could have funded on hand, he'd come up with somebody, but we had all predicted he wasn't gonna be able to find anybody, so there was nobody to fund.
Jump in that one, Scott. Line 05300.
There's no money this year.
Right, the big jump there is just due to the healthcare rates. And so we had to plug in individuals that could potentially go to give you an accurate cost. And that would be based on the health costs that the county absorbs, or the health costs under our current plan. For a family plan, for example, the county would typically pay somewhere in the vicinity of 32,000. You know, just a employee and a dependent is, I believe, high teens, and then so what that cost is that's for two individuals, and then factoring in that one of those individuals may have a family plan, and another one maybe just the employee. So
The department size has been increased from 1 to 2? Is that what you're saying?
so previously, back in 23, the health insurance costs have just adjusted. So in 23, we had 3 positions down there. In 24, we had 1, just the supervisor's position, which is why you'll see up top under the personnel services, 01-136. The budget for that was agreed upon was the 94,987. So it just is dependent on the individuals that are down there and the health insurance costs associated with that specific individual, whether that be that they're taking a family plan, just the employee, or the employee and a dependent. So that's just a cost that is given to us as basically, I work with Monica on that. That's just a fringe benefit. I don't really have any control over that.
So you're saying there were 2 people, 2 agents in that department?
There was 3 previously for years, up until the end of 23. In 24, it got brought down to 1. And we are asking to bring that line back to 2. Right now, currently speaking, we don't have anybody there because that 1 position was a state funded position in 24. We don't currently have a state funded position. Our intentions are to gain a state funded position and also provide a county position. So that what you're looking at for expenditures is 1 county position, 1 state funded position, which is why the revenues offset 1 of the positions.
Okay, so does that mean if you go with a county position, in one of those posts being from the SO, that will pull someone off the deputy roster?
It will not. No, this is a separate department, so this would fund a position for a person to go.
Okay.
And just so you're aware as well, that it's just not broken down that way, but so that you understand that health insurance cost that you're looking at, that 46,000. Part of that is recouped in what you're looking at under the revenues, under line 112, under MDEA revenues. Part of that amount that you're looking at is that health insurance cost.
Do you know how much that part is?
I believe it was I think that was an individual with a family plan, so I think it was 30,000.
Do I have a motion or not?
Not currently.
Not currently.
Wait, yes, there was a motion by
You did it?
Kathleen
Oh, he's a
and
sidetrack.
the commissioner's recommendation.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go with $248,027. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Jail cap.
The cap that I submitted was the 4% that, that's allowed, but there's also, and I'll let jail administrator Richards answer any questions you may have there. So I think it's 299,000 and something is the jail cap that we usually submit for our budget. It's up 4% from last year.
When did that happen? When did you call that? Thank you. When did that 4% happen?
When did it?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, been a long time.
You can't blame me for that one, Kat.
You can get rid of it though.
Well,
How long
my
ago?
understanding is that the municipalities have eliminated that. It's just the counties that are bound by the 4%.
Do you know,
The county has the
Oh, no,
jail,
no, no.
jail 4%, and they also have the overall cap.
Right.
And the county has 2 caps and nobody else has any caps. Which is part of the issue. In addition, I mean, just to throw stuff out, the county has very few, if you look at your revenues over the last 4 weeks, very few sources for us to be able to get that money from anybody else because we only have the taxpayers or whatever funds that the state will allow us to be able to collect. So, I mean, there's 2 issues right there. If you could somehow provide us an opportunity to have income, that would lower your costs and still be able to provide the services regardless of anything else that happens.
Came out 20 years ago.
do you know the issue behind
Has
it?
it been that
Why,
long?
why did they?
Geez, who was that old man that started
They
that?
had an office to the school, the hospital prepared service percentage, it's kind of at that percentage, and then we give them 4% of that.
Well, the jail cap came in, the state was gonna take over county jails. And that
Here we are.
fell down, and so
That was on the ball last year, they were gonna take it over, and
Yeah.
they gave it back real quick.
They gave it back. So they put.
We want to know.
That was the jail cap. That's when that came,
Yes.
20 years ago.
Must have been.
A lot of
Been
people.
a long time.
26, right.
No,
I think
20 years.
So there's been a move from,
I was on.
that
the
like
playground
predates
then.
my paying attention to the legislature frankly, but they were trying to move the county jails into the purview of Department of Corrections.
And the state did.
They wanted to take over all that one. They wanted to take over.
They realized how many employees they would have to add. They would have to assume all the corrections officers in all 15 jails. That's not a good idea. So here we are. They tied our hands with that 4%.
And generally under the towns too, you know, it's always for most of them been the feeling that, you know, the county people, if they get savings and stuff, they were doing better than what the states were, or nationally when they were talking about how much the costs were, so they do, you know, run a tight ship. You know, with all these mandates now and stuff like that, healthcare, you know, that's just,
Well, this does exceed the jail cap, does it not?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it says increase upon LD one growth not to exceed 4%. Well, I'm looking at when I'm saying that exceeds 4%.
Even my math thinks it's more than 4%.
what you did last year, and you chewed out of the undesignated surplus, this year we chew out of the undesignated surplus.
Right.
And then when there's no money left, you don't even have to yank the taxes up even higher. All right, but operations and maintenance, remember we had that, they took that part of it and shoved it in there.
So this is where when you're asking about where the $20,000 go to go here. That's where it's going.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone's name. I don't know her name.
When a
Answer the
department.
hey you.
Hey, you.
Mark,
Mark, thank you. That's it. Well, just, I'm not asking you a question, but when you were commenting earlier about when you budget for 25,000, you only spend 5,000, where the 20,000 goes, is it going to the jail?
Well,
No,
indirectly,
it goes
Okay.
into the.
Well-
it goes on into undesignated.
And then
It's-
it makes a pit stop and then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Yeah, but
not yet,
right.
because we have a negative fund balance.
But that's why.
We got our fingers crossed this year.
That's why it's not there available for cars the next year. Gotcha.
Do I have a motion? Shaking your head doesn't solve.
I know it. Almost 50 years, it's never worked, but I still keep trying.
Let me know how, when you figure it out,
It'll
please
never
let me know.
work. Yeah.
I'd rather slam the doors on it.
100,000 for federal boarding.
Yes. We've been overcrowded lately, and we have nothing to have staff, but one facility has removed the federal inmates. This month, we billed out $18,000 for federal board. This month of October. So we've hit up to $200,000 if I've been here way back, but we had $83.35 a day per federal inmate we house. Right now, we have 9. So there's a little 18,000 this month we're billing. And we're also getting paid for federal transport, so we never have. A couple years ago, we negotiated that if we run the bank, we get paid for cover our expense, which is money in, money out, type thing of that.
You know, and what Tim is talking to, we just completed their PREA evaluation. And that, by having that, gives us the ability to house federal prisoners. So and if you don't pass that,
You don't get nothing.
you don't get the money, plain and simple, you don't get the inmates. And the examiner or the person that came and did that was very complimentary to Tim and Shep, the amount of work that they've done to get that together. That's not easy.
That's Jim.
But also, too, it's not just the ones that's in the building, it's all the stuff for the people with the ankle bracelets and this and that and everything, you know, so.
Can I ask, this is maybe off topic, but as we're likely building a new courthouse in Hancock County sometime in the future. Concerns about that. Do you anticipate your costs for transporting residents back and forth from the jail to the courthouse will go up?
We're put at least probably one more van and 2 more officers that lost transport.
I don't know what that's supposed to be.
But that's not in this, right?
I said it was off topic.
No, it is, it
Next
is a
year's
major
conversation.
concern, as we also talk about traffic
Yeah,
through town.
yeah.
High risk prisoner back seat, we know that we got set through 3 traffic lights, that is a major concern that we have.
Are they zooming to?
We, on it right now, everything's Zoom, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll continue that way or not, but it has been.
Frank, I mean, I don't know if everybody understands, but historically in the past, what would happen is you'd be looking at that Department 11 budget. We know it's 4%. There really wouldn't be much discussion because that's all you can increase it by, and you do your votes and we call it
Sorry.
a day. But really what's unique this year is the commissioners are handing you over the 24 and saying, Department 24, this is how much money we anticipate to get, and this is how much it's actually gonna take us to run this thing, which is over and above. So I'm assuming your philosophy is gonna be, yeah, we acknowledge the 11, but if you are gonna go with a commissioner's recommendation or a department head, you'd have to probably really vote on 24 this year, correct?
Vote on what?
On Department 24, the actual
Oh,
jail
yeah.
budget that would be put
Yeah,
forward.
you gotta vote on both. Yeah,
But historically, at least the last couple of years, that hasn't been
well,
done.
we
It's
just voted on
been-
cap.
We never
Yeah.
had.
I'm not doing that this
So,
year.
yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure, because obviously we have new people here too, that everybody understands it's a little different.
Here's what it is, you actually want us to vote on this budget.
You have to vote on the jail cap,
And then
and then you have to vote on the jail budget.
Or you could, in theory, stay with your 11%, and then the commissioners will have to decide. I mean, obviously, they can't force you to do that, but we're just opening that all up to you this year, so you can see behind the curtain where all the magic takes place on the other side of it, so. So in theory, you could just vote on 11 and say that's the budget, and that's what we're gonna, as the BAC, put forward back to the county, and then the three commissioners would have to unanimously decide whether they want to increase that, so. Technically.
Well, they wouldn't increase the jail cap, would they?
No, you do. No, they increase the jail
Budget.
budget.
Well, right now, we're dealing with jail cap.
If we go over the jail cap,
You're gonna get sued.
you read my mind. I wanted to know, what's gonna happen down the road and what's that gonna cost?
I can say we're not first, would not be the first jail to go over the jail cap. See the jail cap from the station.
And so what,
There's been no repercussions at this point.
Well, haven't most of them exceeded it?
Yes.
Well, even counties.
it's those last three words
Yeah.
at this point.
I agree, but I mean, it's. We have gone over this budget several times. You look at, when you get to the budget, you see the commissioners and meetings, and we pretty much line for line and get where we are. This is the actual cost of a jail. And this is what we're asking the jail cap.
Well, actually, it's not the real cost of the jail.
No.
It's worse than that. It's the real, we've shifted a lot of the stuff that was in the jail elsewhere.
Yeah.
So to run the jail is actually much more than this. And then, Nina, you pointed out some things that could happen down the road that, are gonna make this even worse. And we're not gonna be reimbursed for any of that.
Unless we keep suing.
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question of who's gonna sue you, it's gonna be Maine Revenue Services. For violating. Did you think that Maine Revenue Services is gonna come in and say, you can't raise that money?
Well, and here's what we're
That's when
wrestling
they
with.
moved that
Which,
day.
which statute do you break? This one? Or, we talked about healthcare, right? If the only way that we can fund that is to break this one. So if we don't do that, we're gonna get sued from an inmate for not providing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more likely than the scenario you're talking about now. In fact, it's happening.
Yeah, there's a history of that.
Yeah.
So the 910 that's been added is for the healthcare
Yes.
package.
We've got to
But
get,
there's no contract in place yet, is there?
We have agreed to be working on a contract with 30 days security.
So 910 is pie in the sky. Figure.
Our RFP range up to 2.1 million.
It's not pie in the sky. It's the cheapest one.
Yeah. Trust me, I have the same heartburn you do when I stood in front of them about approaching them for this money. I understand why 100% from the taxpayers. I have the same heartburn that you have, that if it wasn't something that we needed to protect our jail, our staff, our county, then I would not be pursuing this.
And the risks are very high.
Yeah, if you don't do the mental health deal.
Oh, I know. Then it's gonna cost a whole lot more than
Which should be
910.
coming, which should be coming from Department of Human Services,
That's
because you're
exactly what I was
housing
just
some of them, because they don't have the beds or won't use those facilities, correct? Located ones.
And so everybody knows here, seeing this coming down the road, Michael and I worked, we submitted a request for supplemental funding for 25 from the state for 940,000, I think is the number we based, going all the way. So will we get that? Probably won't get the 900, but we're hoping we get half of it. It'll be good. Because this year they pulled 4 million right from the kid he accused. We end up with 130,000 of it.
We got for supplemental fund, help offset our shortfall for 24. And we've already worked on the supplemental that every county has. Had a date to get it in by. Our request was for $950. We got 100% of our request for this year. We asked for 130, we got 130. So we'll get $950. So, and that's an unknown. So that really this could, a supplemental may pay for this. But we're hoping for, because a lot of people that put in this year for their supplemental like funding was based on their cost of the contract. A lot of jails are just starting this process. Had it first year in place this year, and they get funding to help offset the cost of this, of the mental health contracts. So again, it's a fingers crossed, hoping the state steps up, but we never know that answer if they will or where we're gonna, what that number is gonna land on.
Okay.
I heard some jails stop taking people. Correct.
Some did because it's overcrowded, yes.
Staff, on the parts of.
And we're at the point,
That's the thing I'm worried about.
we turn a lot,
Can't keep anybody.
we turn a lot away now, sending up anybody, you know, which we always have, but we're more apt to turn somebody away with, you know, an injury, say they've been in the car accidents, even they, you know, whispered the word self-harm, we send them to the hospital and get it cleared before they come back to our facility. And it just, and that takes it in turn puts, now we have a individual in custody, set up the emergency room, it hasn't been to jail yet. Now that puts the nurses in a bad spot, you know, they have security up there, but it's not the same security as in a controlled environment inside the jail. I mean.
But nobody can force them to take the medication neither.
No.
And even in the jail, you can't.
We cannot
But
force
that's why you're getting, handling some of these people because they're not going to the state facilities.
Correct. And it could be 6 months before we got to 6 months, somebody wait for a psychiatric bed. But once they're arrested, it's a forensic bed, and that cuts that. Well, say there's 10 beds available in the state, and all of a sudden have a forensic bed, they might only have one place that can hold a forensic.
So I mean, it's
It's a
failing
judgment.
in mental health
I
It is.
know,
access, and especially for juvenile. There's
We
so
are
many-
well, you know, I hate to say, we are.
You're triaging mental health.
And the officers are at the point.
So
that
it's
they
for
have to arrest.
hospitals.
The officers do not want to arrest somebody in mental crisis. They don't want to.
Troy Morton was saying that most people up in this jail are, they're because they're a pain in the ass, they're mentally ill, they're not.
That's right. And they have, you know, they just got a point that, how many times you go out by this and scream at your resident, you know, your town for people walking by the bench, you know, before the officers can only warn them so many times, then they have to arrest them. And where they go, they come to jail. And they're off their medications. We can't, you know, medicate over objections, so we have to wait.
And there's that middle
Yeah.
ground too. I'm not trying to cut you off, but there's that middle ground. We've had that conversation before. I've had that conversation with the deputies. You know, I have 3 or 4 people that are, you know, they have issues if they're off their medication. But where's that middle ground? You know they're going off the rails. Where is that support that maybe they'll listen to, so they're not ending up into this and costing this? This is the thing I feel terrible.
Yeah, we've been in a situation, we've had them
Maine's
arrested,
being
they come to
sued.
jail.
I know you do, Kelsey.
We go.
Maine's being sued because we don't have, we're using Long Creek as a de facto mental health care facility for juveniles.
We've had it at the extreme, it's somebody arrested, off the medication, got them back on medication, got them through a state facility, back into us on medication, doing good, and the DAs and the law enforcement dropped the charges because it was. Yeah. It was a mental breakdown. They created it. So it's not that we're bringing mental health people in, lock up, for only key. We know that they're a crisis and we need to fix it.
I guess what is the hope going forward? Because we can't, I mean, I'm a fiscally responsible person, but we can't keep chewing up our surplus.
No.
Funding this. That's the thing. Once we're out of money, we're out of money. Well, I know.
I don't know.
I would have liked to have some friends.
I wish I knew. I just think it's gonna, we just spoke with the gentleman coming to their audit in Tennessee. They've opened up, 32 halfway houses. It's called Restore Tennessee, and, That's the answer. Because most people working in those facilities now are people that graduated from the facilities. And it's showing, there's proof positive that it works, but yet that's millions of dollars, we get millions of dollars, open up these, you know, every county, every district has a male, female halfway house out there, and it's proved that it worked, but we just don't have the fund. I mean,
It's a big upfront cost.
that's
when you-
huge, millions.
And by, in the long run, it's a worthwhile.
Well, it is, mental health is a major issue. We are probably one of the biggest mental, in Hancock County, we're probably the biggest mental health institute in the county.
Fred,
Without a
That's
doubt.
probably true in every county.
Fred,
Anyway, yes.
before you vote, I want to try to head off a potential problem when it comes back to us. I need to, Tim, you've got the budget in front of you. It appears that in 25, Department 24 drives the tax cap. Those two numbers are the same, 3,945,000. But when you look at 23, Department 24 and the tax cap does not match. What was the difference? What changed in 25? It didn't occur in 24. I'm looking just right, but the tax cap in 23 was 2,126,000. The title of Department 24 and 23 was 3,113,000.
We didn't,
The question is, are we using are we doing something different this year that somehow they matched in 25, and they didn't match in 24?
right,
Well, is it a coincidence they match in 25?
no, 24, we did not, we went in with a negative budget because we didn't have a balanced budget, and we didn't, I don't think we exceeded the tax cap last year. The 4%, but the cost of the jail went up. Our revenue in,
Well, the same thing, 23 and 24. Department 24. It's not matched. Tax cap for the same year. Why does it match this year?
Are you talking about the overall total?
Well, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Look at the, look at the department budget, 23, 2,126,000. Now look at the department total. But for Department 24, 23, 3,113,000, two different numbers. You go to 24, you look at the budget. You look at the tax cap for 24, 2,211,000. You look at the budget, 24, 3,114,000. But when you go to 25, they match. What happens?
I see that, I see, I don't know if is that the actual,
So 25 is you're actually saying this year, that's the cost. We're not,
right, but the tax cap shouldn't,
the cap will
shouldn't
stay the same.
meet the budget, should be equal to the budget, because the tax cap.
Should or should not, Tim?
It should not,
Why doesn't
but
it-
you're adding in the 910,000.
It wouldn't match it though.
But it matches the cap amount, so the 24,515 tax cap is the same as what the Department 11.
If you go to county revenues, tax cap and county revenues, 2,897,530.
But you're talking about Department 11,
Department 24 revenues,
For what year?
2025, commissioners,
Okay, 2025 commissioners.
2,299,484. And that's 4% of the last year.
Yeah,
so I think,
at 2,897,530.
right, that's what the tax cap, that's what the commissioners agreed, in a commission meeting to be the tax cap to
Well,
balance our budget. But Department 11, the jail cap Department 11 not equal, is not the same as the grade 2 tax cap and the revenue. Is that what you're pointing out, right, Commissioner?
Well, no, I think what
It
he's
wasn't-
pointing out is that
Department 11 and Department 24 was not the same number in 23 and 24, but it is in 25.
Right.
What happened?
I don't know. You are right, your question, Department 11's,
Listen, if you took 24 tax cap,
right,
you increased it by 4%, then you added $910,000, does it equal $3,945,000?
calculated to do that.
The tax cap in 24 was $2,211,000. 42 times 1.04.
Yeah.
Plus 910,000. Shouldn't that be the tax cap?
What does that show for a number?
What's that?
Plus what?
I think
Nine,
we-
910,000.
I think we increased more expenses than just the cost of the medical.
Because you never,
It's not just
basically last year, this was the argument I had last year too. You never looked at Department 24
the last year.
try to get it to balance.
Right,
So we started out knowing that we weren't gonna have enough money to pay the operation of the jail because the 4% wouldn't cover it.
Right.
The difference this year is we're actually putting down what the cost is and then making
Making
that
that
match with
cap.
what's gonna actually go into the tax calculation. So this year, you're already agreeing, we have to spread that cost to the taxpayers. We can't just pretend it doesn't exist anymore and try to make up for it at the end of the
We're
year,
gonna run out of money.
because we're out of money.
Yeah.
So that's
But wait a minute,
the
we,
bottom line.
the difference is
thought when
more
we-
than just the cost of the,
well, did you know it was
The
more
medical
than the
expense,
4%?
yeah.
In other words, we knew 910,000 would increase the 4%. We knew that was gonna bust that 4% cap. But did you know that there was other things in there besides?
Yeah,
If we didn't
sure.
put the 910,000 there, we'd still gone over the 4%?
Yes, Tim told us
Did
that.
you know that?
You
Yes,
have for years.
yeah,
I
Tim
said,
told us
You
that.
have for years. It's just they never have been able, we just historically waited to see where you end up at the end of the year and hope that timing and everything else allowed us to maintain capital, to continue to pay the bills. I mean,
So
that,
if
that's
you were
why.
going, if you was going to do the tax cap as we're supposed to do, what would the
You'd be
tax cap,
short, you'd be short.
what would you
$3
add
million.
4%, what would you add 4% to?
You would end up coming up with a 2,299,484. That would be all you'd have. So the 3347949, whatever it is, whatever the most recent number is on the commission budget, you subtract 2,299,484. And that's the additional money that right now they're telling you they need to run the jail. And that either has to come out of the taxpayers' direct funding
Or our fund balance.
or, some other revenue source, like you helped pay, you basically took some of the extra revenue we had in the prior year and said, yeah, we need to shift that over to cover that shortfall.
In prior years, did we ever increase by more than 4%?
No.
So this year, on top of the 910,000,
Playing catch up.
right,
And you're basically budgeting the actual cost to operate, the predicted cost or projected cost here.
so I guess we're gonna throw us in jail, I guess we'll throw us in jail for both of them, right? So I thought we were going to jail for 910.
Well, but then, let's carry this out one more year. Okay, so the tax cap for next year is gonna be based on that.
This still would be the 2,299 times 4
Oh,
times
it
4.
is.
Yeah, it doesn't move it because that doesn't make it anymore. You still are 4% on each year.
It's different than LD one.
Different than LD1.
Yes.
And even in LD one, you vote to exceed it, but even in the county LD one, for county, the calculation, that still doesn't move the needle.
It's only a municipality.
You do 1 year vote to exceed.
We need to have this conversation.
Yeah, when you do your final budget.
Well, Bill, the answer to your question was if you take $2,211,042 do the 1.04
Yep.
and add 910,000.
Yep.
You come up with $3,209,483.
So that doesn't compute because we're asking for 3,900,000.
Yep.
Yes. Is this, your jail cap is, like Michael was saying, is for the actual cost of our facility.
No, the current request is the actual
Department 24 is your
Right.
actual
cost.
and you're just reflecting your actual cost in the cap.
Projected costs, yeah, and, yeah.
And the reason is, we can't keep doing this.
Right.
Yeah, but you could have raised more than your cap if Department 24 and complied with the cap.
No, because the cap, the reason behind the cap is that the taxpayers, money you could ask from the taxpayer can't exceed 4% each year to go towards the jail.
I know it.
So the other money, you could increase your budget, but you would have to offset it with other revenue from somewhere else.
Keep going in the hole.
Not if you intentionally comply.
Wow.
No,
And that's the issue, that's what you're doing this year, yeah.
And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's,
So
but
the
that's
tax,
the answer. to
we
your
could have
question.
kept the tax cap in compliance, a 1.4% increase. But
Could.
Department 24 would have been 3,995,000, which is the actual cost of running the jail.
But the reality is you wouldn't be compliant with the cap because you're asking for that additional money straight out of taxes.
We're not playing with the cap anyway.
I know, I'm not, I'm just saying.
Okay, we'll have this discussion. Thanks.
To see anything one way or the other.
You know, we got in this position because we got behind the eight ball for several years. We had a different board here. We didn't raise the tax cap at all. We kept it regular. So, you know, that 3%, 3%, 3% over several years, you didn't get.
Nina, have you heard any talk about tax cap getting rid of it?
I'm looking into, I just sent an email to the law library to ask what the history was on it, because I'm quite curious about why we did that and what we can do about it.
Yep.
And while
I don't want Kathleen to keep yelling at me.
You can't keep saying that.
We moved two seats on chair tonight.
We can't keep telling you though, that you either get rid of it or we're gonna violate it. It's not a good way to do business. You know what I mean? But what are we gonna do? And our philosophy is we'd rather defend ourselves from the state, somebody coming after us for exceeding the cap, than we would for a person who didn't get the proper medical care in jail, because that's a lot more expensive.
I don't disagree with Rick. It's also more ethical.
And the state needs to trust this board to know that they're gonna watch out for the funds. We're not just, you're gonna
I guess.
look at last days, we'll give a 50% raise. I mean, they know what it costs, what taxes are.
I'm sure you can find.
I mean, counties right
Counties
now are
already-
exceeding the cap and
Right.
their overall LD1 cap because they can't make it work.
And I think it's all the jails, we're not alone.
No, we're not.
We can survey that all. I can have.
It can't be.
See if
There's
I-
no way that everybody's held at the same standard we are. There's no way they can continue running
No.
jails. They're all in the same. We gotta
But
be.
they gotta run one
If
building
they
in
are, we're
jails.
gonna fire Tim and hire their jail administrator.
I mean, maybe this type of increase
Yeah,
will
what
help
PC's
to,
talking about.
will help to represent that to Nina, that this is what counties are doing, and this is why. Because they can't sustain.
Fred, we got motions on the table.
No, I was
There's no
looking
vote.
for one.
No.
You interrupted it with this.
There is no motion.
There's no motion, but
There's
you got
the
an-
motion.
You got an increase in your jail of $1.7 million. Year over year.
I can tell you now is not the time to do some drastic cuts.
Not the time to what?
Take drastic cuts.
Oh.
All of a sudden, I'll move to approve the commissioner's recommendation of $3,945,995.
Kathleen seconded it.
Thank you.
Discussion?
Question real quick. At the risk of you getting mad at me, but I, I said to you before this same thing, and you said we're dealing with just Department 11 right now, so should you not be voting on Department 11 first and then vote on the overall?
They
Or are
are,
you lumping them together?
they're just on 11.
I was on the other.
Well, 11 is 2299,484,
No,
not
no,
three.
no, no.
So it might be.
11 is 394599.
That was my point, Michael, is that
Well, then I got a different 11 up here. right?
No, no,
I
no,
like his better.
Yeah,
I don't blame you.
no.
What have you got for an 11?
so my 11's only what the actual cap is,
Oh,
not,
well,
not what the other stuff that was added on. and
just what I
added to it.
said 15 minutes ago.
All right, well, I'm sorry, I didn't have, the number that's in front of me is not the number that's on this sheet right now.
The
I mean,
numbers,
the cap itself would not be,
399,
no,
945. That's my point right from the start, is that we still cannot match. Because we're exceeding the cap in 24, but the cap is the cap. It's a 4% increase, we're gonna take the full amount allowed, and that's the cap. But Department 24 is gonna be more than that, because we need more than the cap to operate business. So we need to recompute Department 11, which is now 2,900,000 something.
and the reason I'm assuming you factored that in is the only way you're gonna get the actual tax dollars is you have to plug it in the spreadsheet somewhere to show up and reflect that actual price.
so
Yeah, that's what we've discussed, was representing the actual cost of running a jail, including the cap.
There's not really the cap, so I mean, it's almost like if you're gonna do Department 11, you've gotta have a line for the cap, and then you gotta have a line for everything else. That
That's what-
totals the total amount.
That's what 24 is.
I know, but 24 doesn't get factored into the budget calculation sheet, right? So in other words, 24 is not gonna become part of our final
No, but this-
taxation.
if you look at the cap for 24, it actually says that the cap itself is 289753. It's part of the calculation that goes into the cap.
But it doesn't add to the rest of it.
if,
Listen,
okay, if I might,
Sorry.
on the Department 24, on line 24515, county tax cap. You've got, I'll use the commissioner's recommended amount of $2,897,530. You're saying that is tax cap that's gonna be the revenue portion of Department 24 jail. Is that correct?
does 2,897,000 represent 24 plus 4%?
That's,
No, I'm asking that
No.
question.
No.
Then I don't know where that 22,897. The tax cap for 25 should be the tax cap in 24 with an additional 4%. That should be the tax cap.
Isn't the cap come off, again, the evaluation of the actual
It's
of the tax of the county, so that has gone up, that is increasing from 24 to 25. Then you go to 4% of that, right? So it would be high, it could be higher than a straight 4%.
So there's two elements in there, something that raises.
Your taxes go up every year. And then there's a 4% off that.
We have to turn in a sheet every year to the county, what our, taxable base has increased for these taxes.
well, what I was getting at is you've got a revenue line under 24 under the commissioners of 3945995, which is supposedly the jail cap. But in the revenue line on Department 24, you're listing the jail cap is 2897530.
Which is much more than 4% over 24.
Yeah.
Much more.
By about 600,000.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it says, 600.
And you
Well,
manage.
it's a 31%.
So my question is, how do you want to define, I mean, it's fine to say you're going to exceed the jail cap. I understand that. But you've got to say somewhere what the jail cap number actually is.
Right.
And I don't know what that number is.
Because if you take your geo cap that you're talking about now, the 3.9.
Well, no, I'm gonna say,
No, but I'm just saying, if that's the number you took, That's the actual projected cost of the budget.
And that's
Right, but
different
that's
than
not the
tax.
jail cap.
That's gotta be
Right, but
different
it's
from
not-
tax.
I understand
All
what,
those numbers come back.
I understand what
That's
Mr.
the goal.
Erlenbach is saying, is he wants to pick a new number, which would become the tax cap. And apparently that's calculated in the 2897530.
Well, I assume so, but I don't know what it is.
Instead of the 3945995.
Well, it says it right here, that's a 31% increase.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the totality. of
Yeah.
everything.
That's feed, that's,
So Monica, or
Only
you
the
can't,
one line.
you can't tell us why the tax cap revenue was increased by 31%.
Oh, I can tell you why, because one is the 4%, but the rest is all the other numbers that are added in here.
so it's not
That
a
we
straight.
normally
4%.
would have had used, but we just figured it out during the year, how to come up with the money. And how you came up with it was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now both Paul and Peter are broke. So, I mean, you have to then turn to taxpayer Joe to get him to pay towards it. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to continue to fund the jail at the rate that you need to operate.
But this is a revenue section. And if we're not gonna get 2,897,000, we're only gonna get 4% of the 2,211,000.
That's what I'm saying. You're only gonna
And we
get
should
2
be showing
million.
that, and then we should be raising the difference between those two in Department 24.
Correct.
Yes.
So, Fred, take 2,211,000, 1.04.
$2,391,463.03.
Bingo minus the 3 cents.
That should be the tax cap.
Well, no, that's only the tax cap if it's a straight 4%.
Right.
And I don't think it is a straight 4%.
Listen, we're not gonna settle this tonight. Give them a number that they can at least agree to. We'll have to do the calculations and refine that number later. That's all you can do, right?
If you're looking for the tax cap, the actual tax cap, that one line item, which is under 24,515, but also goes back to 11, under revenues of 6,900, then it's basically, it's last year's figure of the 2,211,042 times 4%.
And that's just what Fred calculated.
That's correct.
Can you say the number again, Fred, please?
299,483.
Yeah.
You had 202.3 something.
Yeah.
2,391,000.
No,
I've got 2.299.
Yes,
Yeah,
You got
that's right.
2211.
042 plus 4%,
1.04.
Right?
2299.
2,299,483.
Yeah.
They must be, they must have a form they have to fill out, not just straight. Michael must, but the county, after we turn in all the stuff with growth,
So, as far as I'm concerned, that is what we should vote on for tax cap, for the jail cap.
That's
Right.
as good as you can do tonight.
And then, Department 24,
Department 24 is 3,945,000.
I understand that, but you're gonna have to adjust the numbers somewhere in that, and
Make it,
to make a revenue line.
difference. Well, to factor back into the overall calculation, so it's coming out of tax. Yeah.
Right, well, it'll increase the amount we have to raise by taxation. That's all.
I mean, I think Monica and I know where we need to go. It's
Yes.
just a matter of adjusting it correctly in here. So
Yes.
that'll be part of what we do for this final round of adjustments for next week's meeting.
Would everybody agree that we would vote on the $2,299,483 for the tax cap?
I think he has to withdraw his motion first.
Well, I'm gonna, and then we take out Department 24 next week when you come back with the adjusted numbers to reflect how much.
Department 24 is not going to change for it. That's the cost of doing business. All what happens is we reduce the revenue, which means we're going to have to raise more taxes because we don't get the revenue that was reflected in the proposed budget. So Department 24 is going to stay 3,945,000 and they can make some adjustments in this. But it's not going to change because we changed the tax cap.
And Department 11 stays the same.
No, that one is gonna be reduced to 200,
It
2
will.
million.
It will change at the end
It
of the
will
day.
change.
So, yeah, we'll,
It'll change
so I
by-
mean, if you vote to do the cap,
Cap.
and that's where you feel comfortable, then we've got to make the rest of it balance.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
We should do that next time.
Okay. They fill
You
out,
know me with my big ones.
they can fill out the form later.
But that's,
But it has
that's
the right
assuming
amount.
that's assuming that the cap is calculated as a straight 4%. Are we sure
That's
about
right.
that?
We don't have to be sure tonight. That's what they've got to work on. We don't have to.
The cap was 4% over the prior year. So if we only did 3.5 last year, just count it
No, we
more.
didn't know what it is.
No, but I'm saying if we only did 3.5, then it would be whatever last year's number was that you put in that line for cap.
So there is no other element adjustment.
No, it's just a matter of how it all gets calculated on the spreadsheet. So, but tonight, for them, I wouldn't have them worry about it.
I'd be happy to amend my motion, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
to $2,299,483.
Make it 84.
80, okay,
68 cents.
84. Yep, yep, I agree.
Mark Blanchett, second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We in agreement, we'll take up 24 next time, after they get the rest of the calculations in. The number's not gonna change, but how it appears in the spreadsheet will. They'll have to come up with the other revenue.
Just the revenue side, right?
Yeah.
And we approve the total, you know, with the understanding that they will.
If you want, if the body would like, you could vote on the expenditures line on 24 of $3,945,995. Because that's probably not gonna change.
Except the salary line. So what we discussed it in the budget meeting.
Personally, I
About
have
the
to look at
3.2
what you
instead of
have,
the-
but we can come back next week.
Okay, well, let it lie until next week.
Find the right form. I'm not the one to go. I know the form. I saw it right there. Show me that. Here.
So next week, we got Department 24, Department 20, and a review of all votes. And hopefully, we'll have some idea where we lie as far as increase.
Yeah, I mean,
Also, if you want to make adjustments, we can. And when you do 24, it seems to be consensus that 6% for the jail, whatever it is. If you factor that in.
So you gotta be careful, because the jail to the union contract, so you can't, that's been agreed, that's already been decided.
well, this, actually, in this case, that's our issue right now. We haven't negotiated for 25 yet.
That's,
Yeah, right? So
We don't have a,
we don't have a set
Contract
price
in
right now
place.
for 25.
You've got in here that, the difference between the department head and commissioners, the department head was 6%, the commissioners were 3.2%. So if the consensus is going to be the 6%, then we ought to reflect that in there. And we've got some other departments as well, don't we, that we
What-
have.
yes. But what they're saying is the jail contract is currently being negotiated, right? And that's what it says here, is that without a new contract, we don't necessarily know what the new contract amount is going to be for the corrections officers. So the 6% is a,
Placeholder.
yes.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned.
Thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. It's not an easy, problem.
We'll send you the bill.
Thank you, Mark.
She doesn't fill the bill. It was referred to committee and then.
I told Diana to be home by 7:45.